Live. All right. Well, greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back once again to the Storyteller's Corner for Break Time Story Time. This is the 18th standard installment, and I kind of knew that this was going to be coming with this time of year, and I even had warned about it and talked about it a couple times. And eventually, the Minnesota weather and wind was ultimately going to, one of these days, push me to go from that little out, uh, outside bench area in the back near the loading dock to saying, screw that, it's too windy, it's too cold, I'm going to have to take this out to my vehicle for the presentation. And that's where we're at tonight, because it's pretty blustery, and that is causing the air to cut through like a knife. It feels like it's maybe 30 degrees out there in the wind. And I did not bring my winter coat to work. I'm still just using the hoodie to pass through, just from vehicle to inside the casino. You would think, living here in Minnesota for 13 years and having been born and raised and grown up in the Buffalo, New York area, I'd be accustomed to cold weather. But the first couple of days of deeply chilled weather always kind of smack me upside the head and remind me, oh yeah, it gets fucking bitter out here. So I'm hoping that this is carrying to all three efficiently and effectively right now. I am using the Rumble Studio app on the phone once again. That's pretty normal. But I am currently have it selected for Rumble, for YouTube, and for BitChute. And I'm hoping that it is carrying appropriately to the BitChute channel after having toyed around with the settings earlier today on the laptop, so that I had the the desktop version of Studio that I was able to tinker with. I'm hoping that that's carrying properly right now. I'll have to check later on to see if it went through appropriately. So that's the situation as that stands. Where did I put that? Oh, right here. All right. So here we go. All right. No, we got a comment here. Tech Jacob, Tech the Noob. Good to see you, brother, and good to see you are here with us through Rumble. Oh, you are writing your own sci-fi story. Excellent to hear, brother. Here's the thing about being worried about uncertainty regarding your own capacity or ability, Tech, or I'm just going to call you Jake because I know you. Jacob, until you actually finish that first draft, you're always going to be unsure. So the vital thing is to knuckle down and just write the story, whether it be by hand with pen and paper, or banged out on the keyboard, or even thumbed out in an app on your phone. Whatever it is, however you're going to physically put together the story, you've got to get through that first draft. And bear in mind that there is an absolute truism that has been handed down for a very long time, which is the first draft of anything is always shit. It is always the worst version of whatever story ends up ultimately being put forth into either the marketplace of readers or writer or colleagues or what have you. That's why the first draft is never what you ultimately end up handing over to an audience who you are genuinely hoping to entertain and engage. The first draft is just your first attempt so that you can come back later, slap yourself upside the head, ask yourself, what the fuck was I thinking? tighten up what needs to be tightened up, and try it again with the wisdom of, okay, I've seen it now, not from my perspective as the creator or storyteller trying to get this story out there, but now I'm looking at it as a critical thinking reader and an attempt to dice myself apart and put this thing back together and rewrite it in an effort to make it better. The hard work of writing, the really brain melting effort, is not just in telling this story one time and being done with it. It's in allowing yourself the freedom and the obligation, recognizing the duty you have to yourself and to your audience and to the art of narrative, to take that first effort, blow it up, and try putting it back together better than it was before, because it can be done. It can always be done. There's no such thing as a perfect first draft. And anyone who tries to tell you there is such a thing, they are lying and trying to sell you something. Well, your average 250 to 300 word page novel, Jacob, tends to be between 80 and 95,000 words. That's to give you kind of a rough idea when you're using word count. Although ever since the year 2000, word counts in the average novel have been going down. So your standard novel, especially a first-time effort in any of the primary genre fiction areas of horror, sci-fi, and fantasy. Fantasy, your first-time novel nowadays is acceptable if it's between 65 and 90,000 words, typically. Sci-fi, same range. Horror, it's a little shorter. You're almost delving into reducing down into the novella length for what's seen as acceptable or normal for a cagey first-time horror effort. So you get down towards like 55,000 for horror. But if you're going the sci-fi route, you want to be between 65 to 90,000 words for your first effort. It's a good sized novel. That's one that if someone is dedicated as a reader, they can sit down with, and for 30 to 40 minutes a day, they sit down with your book and they're reading it, and they'll clear through it in about 5 or 6 days on average, if they are dedicated to reading at least that much time every day. Just as a kind of a general guideline for your average reader. Yeah. And greetings and salutations to those of you here with us this evening who have not yet chimed in the chat, and anyone who is waiting for me to get started with the presentation of the story. I will get started soon. Yeah, not a problem, Jacob. Any questions of that sort that come up, you have various ways to get in touch with me, brother. I'm always willing to give you quick feedback and let you have an idea of what your framework is or what you should be expecting. There are also other folks who can definitely, if they have the opportunity to answer your questions, so I would recommend that you go and talk to them. Even folks that are on like YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey and BitChute, who are bigger known channels. A great resource would be Savage Books. He is he's a professional editor for a mid-sized publishing house. He's on YouTube. Great channel. Does a lot of story analysis of specific scenes from various television shows, films, comic books. He does a lot of narrative breakdown, and he's absolutely spot on with it. He's excellent. As well as a fellow by the name of Shady Do Rags, though he does more analysis of animated series than anything. But they're both worth your time to check out, I'd say. Sadly, they're both locked in on YouTube. They have not gone to any of the other platforms for streaming or video production. And I don't know if either of them has a Substack as yet. But Anyway, there's potentially some news on the Substack front as well, but I'll cover that another time. Let's move forward. Now, when I last left off yesterday with the break time story time, we had begun the presentation of Ringing, an Amelia City story. And I would like for us to pick up where we left off with that tale. Oh, but I gotta get this back to where I was at, because I wanted to scan ahead and see how much I should try to get through tonight. Am I even in the right folder? What in the hell? Sorry about that, folks. Just give me one moment. I'll be right back with you. Okay, just about back. Here we go. Now, yesterday I had said that I would try to get this story presented in 2 nights, yesterday and today. And then I re-examined this story and realized that's not going to happen. I'm probably going to need at least a 3rd night to get through the entirety of this story here on the Break Time Story Time. So continuing today, and then Wednesday night when I come back, we'll pick up where we leave off tonight in the story. So, if you weren't here with us yesterday or last night, I apologize for the non-segue, but we're going to go right into the story. If you're watching later on this video, I would recommend going back to the previous one so that you can begin the story with us from the beginning and then pick up where we're starting off now. Helen stepped off of the bus at 9:06 the following morning at the Amelia Transit Station in East Perry's business district. After she had walked home the previous evening, keeping a near jogging pace the whole way, she had called her mother to ask if she could come over the following day for a visit. "Do you have the day off of work?" her mother had asked muzzily, having already gone to bed. "Yeah, Mom, I just want to visit, talk to you about living in the city." "Well, I'll call the office and take a personal day," her mother replied happily. "It'll be good to see you again." And now Helen saw her mother's puke green Mazda pulling up in front of the small bus station, smoke blowing out of the driver's side window. She waved as she pulled to a stop, and Helen climbed in, leaning across the seat to give her mother a long hug. "It's good to see you, Mom," she said into her mother's hair. "You too, honey." They pulled apart, and Helen was struck, as she often was, by how much her mother looked like Diane Keaton. Her own features took far more after her father. "Why are you still driving this thing, Mom? I'd have upgraded by now. You can afford it." "Sure, I can, but there's no need to," her mother said. "Your father's money's good, but I'm not about to go throwing it around senselessly." She pulled away from the curb into the sparse traffic, heading for home. "Any word from him besides another late check?" Helen asked with a hint of disdain. "Just last week, in fact. He says he'll sign off on the college fund and let you handle it by next month. Really, Helen, I wish you'd move back in with me. The house is too empty now." "I told you before, Mom, I can't be there anymore," Helen said, lowering her voice. "It was a struggle sticking around for 3 years as it was." They rode together in silence for a few minutes then, before Helen broke that silence by asking, "Have you seen Tina around at all?" Tina Ellis, Helen's best friend since 4th grade. Helen had come home from soccer practice early one evening in her sophomore year to find her father having sex with Tina, in her bed. Lindsay filed for a divorce, which went smoothly and quietly in exchange for her silence about the age of the woman her husband had been having an affair with. She didn't tell the authorities, and just as important for Roger, her ex-husband, she didn't tell his congregation at Amelia First Evangelical. I have actually heard from her. She's working at the Target out on the north side of town. People talk, dear, and she has been courted by your father for the last year, very publicly, very out in the open. Greta Jenkins says she saw her car parked in his garage a number of times overnight. Scandalous, to be sure, but there's not a soul in this town that will hear of it. Now, except for those folks over at St. Matthew's. Yeah, leave it to Catholics and Protestants to forget that they're all Christians, Helen mused wryly. Her mother chuckled, taking the last turn leading to the home that Helen had grown up in. The peaceful little Cape Cod looked much better than it had when Helen finished high school, and the front porch had been finished since she'd moved out to the city. Oh, finally finished the porch, Helen commented, climbing out of the car. Hogwash, her mother replied. Danny Polk and his son came over 3 weeks back, and they finished it in 2 days. That man's a godsend in this town. Sorry about that. Helen let her mother guide her by the hand up into the house, depositing their purses by the front door, and moving without pause into the kitchen. You want coffee, dear? Gods, yes, Helen said, sitting at the solid round oak kitchen table. She ran a hand lovingly over the scuffed surface of the table, remembering each scratch and scuff that she had been responsible for, which was most of them. So, Mom, what did you want to do today while I'm here? Oh, I thought we'd play a little poker, maybe watch a movie or two. Short trip to Pokes for my medication, her mother replied, setting the coffee to brew. The scent instantly transformed the soft, homey little kitchen into a comfortable chill zone, redolent with the heady aroma of rich imported beans. She took a heavy whiff before sitting down with her cigarettes and an ashtray. Just heavenly, isn't it? She said. Specialty blend? Argentinian. $15 damn for a 12-ounce pouch, Lindsay said with a smile. Between the alimony and my commissions, I can more than afford it. Any interesting clients lately? Helen asked. She reached over to her mother's battered white microwave cart, opened a drawer, and took out a deck of playing cards. One interesting one, a young man from Ohio. I'm fairly certain I can work with him. His prose isn't bad, but he's a bit of a prima donna. He's gone through 3 editors already, and 2 of them sent me warnings through email. The problem is, he's got real potential. Helen dealt the cards, her mother lighting a cigarette. Mom, it's been a while since we talked about it. I've kind of forgotten. When did Grandma start having her problems? She asked. Her mother's hands hesitated by the ashtray, her eyes flat and shiny like a shell-shocked soldier. Helen, are you having symptoms? She finally asked. No, Mom, but I kind of want to be prepared, know everything that I can. It's better to have an idea what I could be up against. Her mother, Lindsay, nodded, exhaled, and seemed to slouch a little in her chair. Well, you were only 2 when she first had a major incident. She was 46, so she would have been 39 when your father and I first caught a hint that something might be very wrong with her. She got up then and fetched them both a cup of coffee, the sugar and creamer. Helen stirred hers after folding her first hand. These incidents of Grandma's, were they always about those, or that, what do you call it, a stranger? Almost from the very start, yes, Lindsay said. The really weird part was how she referred to him. The stranger named Molag, she said. I still have a couple of her diaries up in the attic. You held on to them? Yeah, in case you ever started showing signs of the same trouble. The image of the Technicolor cow smiling its glistening, face-splitting smile reared up in Helen's mind. She shook it off with an effort, careful to not let her mother notice. If you want, you can take them with you when I take you home tonight. Helen tried to convince her mother that she could take the bus back home, but Lindsay argued that doing so would cut their visit short. In the end, Helen agreed to stay later and let her mother take her back to the city. Of the diaries, she said not another word. And that is where... Oh, wait, no. One more bit. It was 11:20 when Helen bade goodbye to her mother at the curb in front of her building and headed inside. In the front foyer where the mailboxes were, she noticed a new bit of graffiti gracing the wall. It was one that she had seen back in East Perry at the scrapyard. It was a set of 4 hooked blue claws with a single black line across their rounded tops. For some reason, this symbol always set her nerves jangling on edge. Ignoring the graffiti, she grabbed her mail, then headed to the elevator a few yards away. Inside, she hit the 5 button, looking through her mail as she rode up. Flipping through the envelopes, Helen felt a sudden jolt as the elevator hitched to a stop, the lights flickering. Her hands went out to the walls, her back pressed to the corner. The envelopes slipped from her hands, but Helen didn't bother looking down from where her eyes were locked on the ceiling panels. Abruptly, an old-fashioned telephone ringing sounded from the roof of the elevator, echoing through the shaft. Helen screamed, sliding down to the floor, covering her ears with both hands, her elbows pressed together in front of her face. As she sat there and sobbed, she heard a dull voice call up from somewhere below the elevator. "You gonna get that?" The elevator rocked once again, the lights flickered, and the ringing ceased as though it had never been. Eyes wide, hands trembling, Helen grabbed the spilled mail. When the elevator opened onto her floor, she made a mad dash for her apartment, her purse banging against her side with the weight of her grandmother's diaries. That is where we will leave off for tonight, from Ringing, an Amelia City story. So I see that I lost most of the folks who had been in here previously. Before I started doing the reading, there were 7 people here. Now we're back down to 1. That's to be expected. We're in the middle of a story being presented bit by bit. So that's not actually all that shocking. Particularly given that, what I do here when I'm streaming on my breaks at work, and really any of the videos that I have made over the last, however long I've been doing this sort of thing, on YouTube and on back in the day on Blog TV, and now on BitChute for the last 4 or 5, 4.5 years, and now on Rumble. It's a very niche thing. So getting folks to stick around for the whole thing, I imagine, is a little bit more of a challenge. It's okay. So I appreciate that these streams are automatically archived, so that folks who might be interested, but they don't have the opportunity to listen to the entirety of the thing right then and there, they can check in and out. They can come back to it at a later time. And I appreciate that that's there. It's not always going to be, because servers get shut down and material gets lost, but this is also part of why I like to have everything that I have written over the years saved to multiple devices and memory cards, hard drives, backed up in the cloud. I keep paranoid in order to make sure that my stuff doesn't just vanish permanently, forever, gone, never to be seen again. It also helps to have everything that I have written and had published is still available at some point online on the market. You can purchase a number of my works at your various online book retailers like Amazon, like Kobo Books. Hell, even Google Books has quite a lot of my backlog available in ebook format. And much of it on the cheap. But there are also actual physical copies available for purchase on barnesandnoble.com, on amazon.com, from Thrift Books. Thrift Books is a big one, and I will always recommend Thrift Books, in large part because they carry a rather sizable mythology collection. It's actually where I got a couple of my Flame Tree Publishing collected volumes of mythology. Between Thrift Books and Half Price Books is where I ended up getting my current collection from. I've got a few that I'm still missing. I gotta eventually get back on there and track those down and get those ordered and brought into my library. That's something else that I've considered doing on one of these break time story time streams, is not my own story presentation, but perhaps looking at and comparing or contrasting some modern interpretations or presentations of older folklore and mythology, and kind of giving a brief takeaway on where the source mythology comes from, or folklore or urban legend comes from, and how much it's been changed and adapted to fit current presentation technology, technique, and public tastes and audience desires. Looking at to see if I could find some of the shorts I wrote and then transcribed to the computer. I lost. Hold on a second. I'm being called. I gotta mute my microphone here. Sorry about that, folks. Work calls, and I'm gonna have to get going in here in a minute or two. But yeah, it sucks, Lucian, whenever you lose something that you've been working on for a while. It sucks, but this is also part of the reason why I always recommend doing a acknowledged. It's why I always recommend doing a handwritten outline. And in the course of doing your handwritten outline, I also would recommend doing what Terry Brooks referred to as a primacy, or a primary scene skeleton, which is you take a handful of the most major story beat events throughout the course of your story from beginning to end, and you just do a kind of a brief draft or sketch of those vital scenes and sequences, so that no matter what happens to the typed up digital version of your draft, whether it be first, second, third, final, whatever, if it gets lost through digital rot or corruption, or you just lose the disk or you lose the drive, the computer takes an ultimate shit on you, because digital is not 100% reliable. Whether it be on your own physical device or in the cloud, there's nothing saying that that file is always going to be available for reference. God only knows how much knowledge, how much wisdom, how many stories, how much mythology and legendarium we have lost through the course of history to disaster. But if you have a physical copy that you can refer to, you can attempt to recreate that effort. And then make sure that you transpose or save your outline in some other newer form. You have to update it. Make sure that it's kept in a safe place so that it can be referred to later, and if necessary, be used as the foundation upon which to recreate that which has been lost. I know it's paranoid of me, but I like to make sure that I've always got a physical outline, just in case something happens. You never know. But anyhow, gents, I'd like to thank you for joining me here tonight for the last of this work week's editions of Break Time Story Time, because today is my Friday. I always have Mondays and Tuesdays off, so you won't see me here for the next couple of days. And I'd like to invite you to come back Wednesday evening, when we will continue the presentation of Ringing an Amelia City Story, written and presented by yours truly. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.